All right, welcome all. New York Got Game Live. It's your guy Dexter Henry. We're going to be doing this once a week. And for those who don't know, this is kind of a if you know situation. But if you don't know, my co-host on this journey will be somebody I've worked with before. We used to do a podcast together called the Ain't Hard Stuff Podcast. You should still check that out. All the episodes are still up. It's really some really dope stuff. We used to do a sports and hip hop podcast together. But Brian's done great work with us at the New York Post Sports Department, and one of my favorite people to talk basketball with. So we had to have him on the show. Brian, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, we've been working together, people, for almost 10 years.
Yo, you made me. I don't know if that kind of made me feel old, but also like, damn, it's been a long time putting in some work.
Yeah, almost. Goes back to even the St. Francis days. But happy to be here. We're going to be talking about Knicks every week because this is regarding preseason expectation, the most important and in some ways the highest expectations that the Knicks have had in literally 25 years. Just about.
Oh yeah,
it's not even a joke.
Oh
like
yeah,
if I was looking at past preseason odds, over under totals, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time they had like this short a number to win an NBA title before the season was literally in the early 2000s.
Man, that doesn't make the Knicks fans feel too great about this either. Knicks fans are like, damn, it's been that long. Yeah, it's been that long.
Yeah, but they're here now.
They're here now. No. I hear you. They're here now. I agree with you. This is easily the most anticipated season for the Knicks in quite some time, and you could feel it. Today I was at the Liberty Parade, and I was walking back to SNY Studios, and somebody stopped me to recognize me on the street and was like, he's wearing a Knick hat, and he's like, yo, I'm hyped about the Liberty, but what do you think about these Knicks? And it's like, yeah, man, this is a season where people are hyped. I was at the Knicks Fan TV watch party, and people were all really hyped about it. Now, things didn't go so well for the first game. We're going to get into that, and we are going to have JD from Knicks Fan TV. He will be joining me. I saw JD at the game. When he gets on, we'll talk about what our reaction was a little bit to the game. So we'll definitely talk about that. Thank you to everybody checking in, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching on Twitter. We appreciate you. Send us your comments, your questions, anything you have. We will address that, and we will answer that. So we have JD joining us. Then we also will have Knicks beat writer for the New York Post, my guy Stefan Bondy. He will also be joining us here to talk. So we'll always have some good guests for you every week on the show. Shout out to my producer, Jeff Stansberry, doing a fantastic job producing the show. So we'll be rocking with you. But let's get right into it, Brian, because the Knicks, a rough loss on Tuesday to open the season, okay? The Celtics hit every shot. It felt like every three-pointer they hit. The Knicks, they get blown out. They lose by 24, I believe. And
23.
It felt 23. Sorry, I don't want to add another point. We don't need
honestly,
to.
same difference.
Same difference, right? But I'll say this. It felt like a lot more, right? Like it felt like a lot more. And I think because I was watching this game around Knicks fans at the Knicks Fan TV watch party, which was dope. Shout out to CP and the guys. It felt, you could feel the weight of everybody on it. What was your reaction to it, B? Were you tripping over this? Is this something you were like, oh man, this is really bad? Or was this just like, okay, this is game one. They still have some things to work on.
Yeah, we've seen the Boston 3 party sort of just go crazy all of last year.
Right.
I knew things were worrisome when two things happened within the first few minutes of the game. One, the defense just looked lost, which you don't often see with Tom Thibodeau teams. But again, this is a team, the Knicks team in particular, that needs some grace because this is going to be a process, like integration and things of that nature. You talked about previously, they could be 5-5 after 10 games and people might freak out. And there's not really a need to do that this early on. When you're trying to gel really new parts, you're going to need 10, 15, 20 games, sometimes even longer than that. A lot of times even longer than that, especially nowadays where NBA teams just don't practice as often as they used to because they're trying to conserve a level of energy. Like that's what training camp and preseason is for. And it's hard to integrate guys in that way. So the defensive rotations were slow and Boston wasn't doing anything super intricate offensively. It was just kind of like swing. We have somebody in the corner who can shoot this three. We're going to shoot it and we're going to knock it down. Swing. We went from the top of the key to this wing right here, went back, to the other wing and somebody's open, or you would just sag off of somebody like Jason Tatum, who could shoot 3-point shot, who's clearly fixed his jump shot after Steve Kerr maybe pissed him off during the summer with his Team USA experience. Like all these different things that the Knicks they're going to get better at them. OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, you have two of the best like defensive wings, and you have these guys to potentially guard the two Jays in Boston. But on opening night, it's just a tall task. The other thing that was worrisome to me that I hadn't gotten to was they put Drew Holiday on Karl Anthony Towns, and they're like, go ahead. We're fine. We'll knock yourself out. That's something that the Knicks are going to have to answer to and adjust to eventually. This is not how a playoff series between these two teams will go. And a lot of people think this is going to be what we're going to see in the Eastern Conference Finals in terms of these two teams playing each other. So those things stood out, but it's just the first game of the season. Right. So I think when they face each other later on and they don't face each other again for a little while, it's going to look different.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there were some of the concerns for me. I mean, I think Boston shot, an ungodly percentage from 3 through 3 quarters. They missed almost everything in the fourth, right? They were trying to break that record, and they end up only shooting 48%. But, one point in this game, third quarter, they're close to 60%. And the Knicks did not play great offensively, but they didn't play bad offensively, right? They shot 55% from the field. They shot just under 38% from downtown. So it wasn't terrible. Most times, that's good enough to win you an NBA game. But the math wasn't massing for the Knicks, right, on Tuesday, and I think that hurt him. So am I concerned about the defense? I have some of the similar concerns you have. I think the point you bring up about Drew Holiday on Karl Anthony Towns, right, and that the Celtics are pretty much just like, okay, go ahead. Well, Cat's got to make – there's two things. I think Cat's going to have to punish Drew Holiday, who's an excellent defender. We know that, but he's got the size, right? Yeah. The other thing with that, and I'm sure we'll get into this some more, that is a little bit concerning to me, and I think this is also part of this going to take time for this team to gel, is Josh Hart, right? Because he's the guy that basically when you see a defense like that, the Celtics are like, yo, go ahead and beat us. We want you to beat us. And Josh has been a little hesitant. He's talked about he's not sure about where he is in offense with his team, and he has to adjust. And I think they still need him to be a hustle guy, somebody that pushes the ball up the court, somebody that's great when it's 4-on-3 situations in terms of making the right pass. But the other thing for me is when he's open, he's got to take those shots. And he was hesitant, and I think the more he's hesitant, it's going to hurt. Good news, Knicks fans. And Brian, you and I were talking about this the other day. The Knicks don't see the Celtics again until February. Okay, so they got time to work on some things. Some people are going to panic. Oh, they didn't have Porzingis. It's going to be fine. I think it'll be okay. You referenced what I said on New York Got Game earlier this week in our recorded episode, and I said, look, this is a team after 10 games. And to be credited, Jonathan Macri, Knicks film school, said, he said, look, this Knicks team could struggle through 10 games if their schedule's tough. And I said, all right, if they're 5-5, some people are going to panic. I'm not panicking off of one game. Now, we're going to get into this more. The next game is against the Pacers, who present some of the same problems offensively as the Celtics, right? They're a team that can go 5 out. But Brian, I know we'll get into this a little deeper too, especially when we talk to Steph, but some of your concerns is that they have the same 5-out ability as the Celtics, but they can also play faster, right? And that's a bit what maybe worries you about this matchup on Friday for the home opener for the Knicks.
One of the top teams in pace last year. One of the top teams in offense last year. Probably would have finished at the top by a mile if Tyrese Halliburton never got injured last year. The thing with the Pacers is they're going to look to speed up the Knicks. This is something I was actually saying before their playoff series last year. We saw it in spurts, and then eventually the Knicks broke down to the point where it didn't even matter, and the Pacers end up winning Game 7. Now, with that, the Pacers are, they're fully formed now. They have continuity. They didn't make a bunch of changes during the offseason. They're a team that I think is not like the Atlanta Hawks from a few years ago where they got to the conference finals and it felt like a fluke. I think the Pacers are legitimate from the standpoint of they can be a factor in the Eastern Conference, so don't overlook them. It's not to say they're going to win this game on Friday, but with the Knicks having some questions about how they're going to gel, I think they're going to get off to a better start in this game at the very least. And I think you're going to see some cleaner offense. Like, these are professionals. They're going to figure it out. It may not be overnight, but this is a good matchup for them. And it's smart also to put this one on a Friday as the home opener, given what we saw last year. But the Pacers are going to try and speed this team up. They're going to try and space the floor. They're not going to shoot the same volume of threes as the Celtics because, I mean, 61 threes is just nuts. That's 15 a quarter. But at the same time, with the Pacers, they are going to shoot threes. Like Tyrese Halliburton is going to do that. Andrew Nembhard is going to do that. They have Miles Turner, who's a 5 that can do that. And Pascal Siakam, he could stretch it a little bit, but he's mostly going to be on the attack, and they're going to do a lot of driving and kicking, which, you know, Knicks fans obviously saw a bunch of last year in the playoffs. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting matchup, and it's going to be another important benchmark. Like, the Knicks have all these certain benchmark performances early on in the schedule. Like, it's playoff team after playoff team after playoff team. And we're going to see where they are. Like, that 10-game mark is a good sort of sample size. And like, all right, let's see what is the next step in terms of developing, what they have to work on. How far off is Mitchell Robinson until he comes back? What are you going to do around the margins in terms of a roster? All things we're going to be talking about here. But this Pacers matchup is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. I'm looking forward to it. I will be in the building tomorrow night at the Garden for that one. Should have a good post-game wrap on that. Some good things coming this weekend on New York Got Game. Now, look. Some Knicks fans are going to listen to what they say, and they're going to say, hey, Brian and Dex, we hear you. But I don't like what I saw on Tuesday night. I don't like it.
It's fair. It's a totally fair response.
Totally fair. Get how you don't like it. Totally understand, right? Totally get it. But I want us to take a listen to what Josh Hart had to say, because Josh Hart spoke about this after the game and his reaction to the Celtics shooting lights out from downtown. Let's take a listen to what Josh Hart had to say on Tuesday night after the game.
Getting to those guys, what were they? Did they do anything different that you saw on the perimeter to get those open looks?
I don't know. NBA needs a drug test all of them. I'll tell you that right now, dog. Because that was, I ain't never seen nothing like that before, man. So, I mean, like I said, you gotta give them credit, man. They're already an explosive team, and obviously there was energy in the arena today that was contagious. I mean, and they played extremely well. Like I said, we'll look at it, we'll learn from it, look at some of the defensive missteps that we had that led to their shots, but the game one. We have 82 other ones. We're not going over.
There you go. First of all, yes, game one, sometimes you got a drug test, right? Sometimes stuff is just so ridiculous that you're just like, yo, they must be juicing, right? Yeah. Or something.
Turn off the controller, you know what I mean? Put the game away.
Yeah.
Try again tomorrow.
Obviously, Josh is joking there, but I found it funny. But, you know, I think his point coming to the end is right. They were ridiculously hot. This is one game at a time. I understand it was an embarrassing look, especially to the point that Brian is making here, that there was so much hype heading into this next season, right? All this hype coming, and then they play the defending champions on opening night in Boston, and they get roasted from downtown. But listen, it happens. You know, like Josh said, yeah, 3-4 times a night, a year, you're going to have a team that even when you're closing out well, you're doing whatever, they just are hitting everything. You just got to tip your hat. You know, it's going to happen. Like I said personally, I'm not really tripping over it. But we also have to give credit to the Celtics. Like you said, too, the Celtics are a great team. And you brought up the C word there in continuity, Brian. They're a great team. They have continuity. You thought I was saying another C word? Nah, come on. We're not doing that. But they have the continuity, right? They have had this. They have the championship medal, if you want to say that. So for me personally, you know, like I said, this is one where you don't like it, but I always think it's a long season. It's one of 82. And the true measure is how do the Knicks respond on Friday. I think their effort in the first 6 to 7 minutes of this contest against the Pacers on Friday is going to be very telling. And we've heard from the players in the last couple of days, including today, about how they want to respond, right? You've heard about what they want to do. And, you know, I want to play another thing, because one of the things that people were very high on out of the preseason was how well Jalen Brunson and Bodega Cat were playing in the pick and roll, right? It looked so good. But Cat had a game, where people can say, "Oh, it was mediocre." It wasn't great. Brunson did Brunson things and was pretty efficient, right, in what he did. But it's going to take chemistry and time between them. And Jalen Brunson had this to say about the chemistry developing between him and Cat and how that's going to take a little bit of time.
A lot of people in this organization, that what I've seen with Tibbs, they don't really stay linear. They've always taken next steps. And so regardless of what that step is, whether it is production-wise, mentality, or whatever, there's always a step to be taken. And so regardless of what it is, it's happened under Tibbs. I've seen that from back to when he was in Chicago.
Yeah, look, it's gonna take time, and they're gonna figure this out together. Is there anything you didn't see from Brunson and Cat offensively, Brian, that you would like to see more of going forward?
I mean, sure, but I didn't expect to see it in game one. Like, Karl-Anthony Towns struggled. I thought maybe he'd have a better night, but again, like, getting acclimated to a new team, it's going to be difficult. You're not only acclimating him, it's also Mikal Bridges, who's also high profile and who is also somebody that you traded a lot of first round picks for. Like, all that's going to be difficult, and you're doing it in Boston, where the defending champions, who were better than everybody by a lot last year, there were health in their favor as well. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like, there was a lot to overcome there. I think the Pacers, in terms of getting into their offense, is going to be a cleaner sort of matchup. Now, it's not to say that the offense was horrendous. They just couldn't keep up with Boston, because they actually, like, as a team, the Knicks, they had a 64% true shooting percentage, which is good. From the field, they shot 55%, which is also good. From three, they shot 37%. The problem was Boston, as you mentioned, the math not mathing. Boston made 29 threes, the Knicks made 11. Boston attempted 61 threes, the Knicks attempted 30. The answer is not necessarily attempt more three-pointers, but, I mean, you're probably going to need more than 30 to compete with Boston, and even then Indiana, compete with Indiana, rather, on Friday. But there's just a number of things that they need to sort of hammer down that it'll take a little bit, but that's not to say that they're going to all of a sudden go 0-10 either. Like, the Brunson and Cat chemistry, the obvious thing you want to see is the pick and pop play, and other teams know that that's coming. So it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate that. And you want that to, invoke some other actions and options on the offensive side, because you have other guys that can shoot. But if it's going to start with that, then yeah, you're going to be able to work around that as your staple of this offense. And ultimately, you traded for Cat to get Brunson more space to work, to find other shooters and other guys to work. So, once they figure out their spacing, other things can sort of flow within the offense.
Yeah, and that stuff will figure itself out. The guys will figure it out. I'm not particularly worried about this at all whatsoever. I want to thank everybody for checking in with us, although Brian just concerned some of you guys because he said he could go 0-10. Nah, he just kidding. He's not going to do that. People heard the 0-10 and they're going to be like, oh, no, this can't happen. Thanks everybody for checking in with us on New York Got Game Knicks Weekly Live. We're going to be bringing it to you most times on Thursdays. We will let you know if there's any other dates. This is Dexter Henry Bryan Fonseca here. If you have any questions you want us to talk about with the Knickerbockers, this upcoming matchup, your reaction to the game against the Celtics on Tuesday, definitely let us know about that. JD from Knicks Fan TV should be joining us soon. We also have Stefan Bondy, Knicks beat writer for the New York Post, joining us on this episode here. One of the things I think we'll also get into, we'll definitely talk with JD about this, was Mikal Bridges' shot. And something that I thought was interesting in watching this game was some of the Knicks fans who were around me were in the second half, when they didn't have anything else to cheer for, they were just cheering for these Mikal Bridges makes, because they're like, all right, there's all this stuff with him tweaking his shot, and, which is interesting to me because he's been a career 38% three-point shooter. We know he's automatic from the corner. But, he wants to clean it up. Forget Tuesday. Take Tuesday out of it, right? I know it's hard to do that. But were you concerned about this heading into the season, considering how he had shot in the preseason?
Yes, because I drafted him in fantasy. It's a short answer. No, but I mean, you wonder, because to your point, he was making, like, you want somebody who's hitting 36% of their threes on volume, and you could consider them somebody you have to guard out there, somebody who's like a legit shooter or whatever the case may be. Mikal Bridges has been a good 3-point shooter, generally speaking, for most of his career. So it was like, I get it. You want to eliminate, what you may deem as like unneeded, unnecessary motions within the shot. But I feel like if it's fine, it's fine. And if it's going to look more awkward, then just let it be. Like Chet Holmgren was going through the same thing in Oklahoma City. We'll see how that goes, because I feel like they made his form slower now as a trade-off to having a higher release point. It doesn't look as fluid. Maybe it's because he's not used to it yet. We'll see. But I think with Mikal Bridges, like, I don't think this is a long-term sort of thing. And I also think this is a better fit for him than he was in Brooklyn, where he was kind of miscast. And that's not to say Brooklyn shouldn't have traded him or whatever the case may be, because,
Right.
what they got. And I think it's a trade that could work out for both sides. I think it's definitely going to work out for Brooklyn. We'll see how it works out with the Knicks, though. I think it will work. The thing is, with Mikal Bridges, he is not a 1 or 1A offensively. He's kind of closer to what he was in Phoenix, but now I think he's a better version of that because he's more developed. He's had the experience of being a 1 or 1A, but you ain't going to be a 1A in the offense with Cam Thomas. Cam Thomas will make sure of that, as he's made very clear in Brooklyn. But so I think ultimately with Mikal Bridges, yeah, I think he'll be fine. It's going to be an adjustment. I wouldn't expect 20, 25 points a game like he was doing in Brooklyn. Sometimes I would expect it in like sort of the mid to high, maybe high teens more often. And he'll have his games offensively. But I think mainly what you want is on defense, because the rotations for everybody in that last game was just like, they just looked like they weren't on the same page. Once they get that down, like I think for Mikal Bridges, you want him to be like this lockdown all defense type of dude that he had been previously in his career. You want him to get back to doing that. That's what Tom Thibodeau, I'm sure, cares about more also.
Yeah, and he's the kind of guy too, to that point, right? I think if he is giving you the effort that we know we can have from him on the defensive end, I think that's going to help him with the confidence. And to be fair, and we'll get into this too, he did finish strong. He did shoot the ball much better in the second half than he did in the first half. So I do think that was somewhat of an encouraging sign. The other thing I think, Brian, that was a big concern, and we talked about this in the season preview this week, was, all right, people were concerned about the depth of this team, and particularly backup center. And when I was at the watch party the other
I texted you about this immediately as it happened.
You did. You did. And when I was at the watch party the other day, a bunch of people, I heard them near me. They were cursing Jericho Sims. They were not happy at the performance by Jericho Sims. Now, if I'm being fair, and I did rewatch the game a little bit, Jericho Sims, I thought he rebounded the ball well, which is something Tibbs talked about him doing well, which we know he can do. But he did look lost at times on defense, particularly in pick and roll situations.
Yes.
And I think that's something that is annoying the Knicks fan right now. And I understand why that is annoying them. Are you concerned about this? Does Jericho Sims have sort of a short leash as the backup center? Should the Tom Thibodeau start playing some Ariel Purdy, who looked decent? I know it was garbage time, so I'm not going to go crazy about how he looked in those minutes, although I like Huck Purdy, just to be
clear.
Got
a few rebounds, yeah.
Got a few rebounds, right? I mean, are you tripping over Jericho Sims' game one performance, or are we going to just go back to, it's game one?
Here's the thing about Jericho Sims. What Knicks fans and other people should understand is that he's going to get a shot. He just is. The reason why he's going to get a shot is because he's in the last year of his contract. And you have to sort of see at this point, Dex, like, what do you have at Jericho Sims? Can he actually play his way into a Deuce McBride type of contract where it's like 3 years, 11 million, like, just a small extension that's cheap in NBA terms, and someone that you can keep in your rotation as your 8th, 9th man. The problem is he was the 6th man against Boston. He was the first guy off the bench, and I think he played second most minutes after, obviously, Deuce McBride, who played very well. And you're going to have to see what you have in him now, especially because you're so shorthanded. Mitchell Robinson's out. Precious Achiuwa is out. Precious Achiuwa was healthy. He'd probably play before Jericho Sims. I think we all would acknowledge that. And with Hawk Purdy, He's on a two-way contract. Now, I think there's a world where he's better than Jericho Sims. It's probably not going to happen tomorrow, but throughout the year, like, we'll see how this develops. But Jericho Sims is going to get his shot. This is his chance. You have a couple months now to sort of cement yourself in the rotation. If you can't do that, no harm, no foul, and you can't really move him, and he moves on in free agency, and, you know, good luck in your future endeavors. But in the business of basketball, yeah, you're trying to exhaust that salary slot and see what you can get out of it. And if you can get nothing, you do away with it, wipe your hands clean, and then on to the next one. And that's probably going to be Ariel Hawk-Purdy, who, you know, was effective when he played in Melbourne last year. Like, I think we could talk about him more in depth, you know, probably when he's converted, if he's converted from a two-way contract, still has to produce. But he showed some things in Australia where it's like, all right, maybe he can be, and I like the Knicks, you know, drafting him when they did. Maybe he can be somebody that you invest in at some point, but there's still a lot of room to grow there. And, you know, we'll see if Jericho Sims can sort of, like, you know, this is a learning curve for him too still. He's been in the system for a while, but you want to see some improvements from him, and he needs to do it fast if he's going to stay there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of how we judge him. Not even just we, but even the coaching staff, right? The team is going to be what he does to improve on the defensive end. That's how he's going to earn his minutes on the floor. I mean, that's always been the Tibbs way, right? You got to show it in practice. You got to show it on the defensive end. But you're right. I think this is a huge opportunity for Jericho Sims. I still think there's some talent there. I understand why some of the fans are frustrated with him. But listen, the Knicks are low on bodies. He has to play right now. He's got to play right now. Listen, and I'm somebody, maybe I'm being super glass half full here, but I think sometimes when you have these injuries, when these things happen, it's an opportunity for some of these young guys. It's an opportunity for Jericho Sims to get some minutes and be thrust in against some really good competition. It's a good opportunity for Pacome Dadier, who I'm very high on, and according to Ian Begley, people within the Knicks are very high on. I like that draft pick that the Knicks made. I liked him. Myself and Chris Persianen talked about it on the pre-draft show. We spoke about that, and I think that he could be a really good player, but he's going to have his lumps. He actually didn't look too bad when he was out there, a little lost on defense sometimes, but to be fair, almost everybody in the Knicks looks lost on defense on Tuesday night. So I'm not really sure about that, but yeah, I think it'll be fine. I think it's a good opportunity for some of these young guys to get a shot here and show what they can do. And you never know how that is going to help with your depth if you are able to add pieces later on or down the road in the season. That could help. So I think it's something that will be very interesting to see. Thank you, everybody, for rocking with us here on Knicks Weekly Live. Thank you, everybody, for checking in. We see you in the comments. We appreciate you for checking in. So waiting on JD from Knicks Fan TV. He's been having a little bit of technical difficulties. He will be joining us, as well as Stefan Bondy from the New York Post, the Knicks beat writer there. We got some comments here. We got Jay Quaza. Like Jay Quaza.
It's a Pokemon reference.
Okay. See, I don't do the Pokemon. I know you do, but I don't do the Pokemon. You're gonna learn a lot of things watching this show. Brian and I are good friends. There's some things he does that I don't do. I still love him. That's it. It's
vice versa also.
Yep. Fair enough. Jay Quaza, sorry about not getting the Pokemon reference there. I like Hawk-Purdy over Sims right now. All right, so you got some people wanting to start him there. Also checking in, Walter White, love the Breaking Bad reference there. I got that one. We got that one there. Walter White says, let's go Knicks. Loving it right there. Jay Quaza also checking in again. Says, I'm looking at Washington compete with Boston right now, and I'm not worried about the loss. Yeah, NBA, that's the NBA for you. The Knicks get bombed by the Celtics, and the Wizards, yes, the Wizards are out here competing. Unbelievable. But
it's also one of 82.
Yes.
And you know, Washington, I don't think Washington played yesterday. I think
they did not.
This is their season opener. Yeah, so you know, I think Washington is going to be terrible. So
yeah, I think that's a safe bet. But checking in with us right now, we have JD, my guy from Knicks Fan TV, joining us to talk about the Knicks and Celtics. He was in the building with me at the Knicks Fan TV watch party on Tuesday. JD, what's going on, man?
Dexter, how's it going? Dexter Bryan.
Good, man. Good. I mean, you're smiling. You weren't smiling the last time I saw you at the watch party. I want to let the people know, JD, this was about 4 or 5 minutes in the fourth quarter. JD looks at me, he's sitting a little bit down for me, and I come over to talk to him, and JD's like, yo, what are we going to talk about on Thursday? I don't know what we're going to talk about because this is so bad. How you feeling, man?
I said the same thing to CP during halftime. I said, CP, do I have any PTO that I could use for post game? Because this was such a disappointing opening night. Listen, it's one of 82, as you even saw yesterday with Miami, who a lot of people are regarding as they do every year as a team to watch. They were down 32 points to the Orlando Magic in their home opener. So, and you saw a few blowouts last night. Right now, ironically, the Wizards are down 1 point with 5 minutes to go in the second quarter to the Celtics, 49-48.
This does not make the Knicks fan feel any better. None of this makes them feel better.
It's only October.
I think it should though, because it's like, the first week I think is just tricky in the NBA.
Yeah.
Like for example, tonight with the Wizards, like, teams that you project, like the Hornets last night. The Hornets they're down 20 plus points. They come back and they beat the Rockets. The Rockets are supposed to be a team that are supposed to elevate this year. And so I think the first week, you're even teams that you project that are not going to be very good teams, they're not going to be playoff teams. It's just that opening week of jolt of energy. Everybody's going to, especially those kind of young teams, they're going to play very hard until, some losses come about. And got a little bit of a issue here with my headphone, but I think the first week it's gonna be very just surprising in some sense. So what happened last night, what happened on Tuesday, I think it was a surprise. I was very disappointed for the simple fact that even with the fact that the Celtics are the defending champs and they have the ring nights, they have everything going on with the home opener. I just thought the Knicks would come out with more energy, more competitiveness. I thought they would be more prepared. And I understand it's game one, but I still felt that they would show a little bit more fight, a little bit more of. And a lot of times, if you look at history, that first game is a game to get versus defending champs, a team that won the championship, because on ring night, you have the emotions, you have the ceremonies. There's a lot of talk about maybe that team being a little bit distracted, a little bit out of their game plan. And boy, the Celtics look like they're on a mission this year.
They sure look like it. I didn't talk to you about this, JD. And there's some interesting things when you look at the start of the Knicks in the Thibs era, right? Because we talked about the first 10 games the other day with Jonathan Macri and CP. The Knicks in the Thibs era, they were 5-5 after 10 games last season. Last year, they were 5-5 after 10 games, right? Which I said, they might be that this year, and people might start panicking. They were 5-5 after 10 games the year before that, 6-4 after 10 in the 2021-2022 season, and then 5-5 back in the We're Here 2020-21 season, which feels like 10 years ago. But the Knicks have gotten off to slow starts. Are you concerned that they could get off to a slow start here? Two-part question. Are you concerned they could get off to a slow start here, JD? And were you concerned about what we saw at the Boston 3 party, as my man Brian called it? Are you concerned about the fact that the Celtics hit so many threes on the Knicks in game one?
Well, we're going to find out tomorrow night, because you're talking about, what you just allowed 60 plus threes. It got to a point where it was a joke. Like they were just throwing 3 after 3. And the Celtics during preseason shot about a 55% clip rate in terms of their offense was 3-pointers. It's about an 8 to 10% increase on last season. So I mentioned how it looks like Joe Mazzulla's emphasizing the 3-point shot more. And I think it's an NBA thing as well. I think you're going to continue to see teams just try to hoist threes. The game has changed. But for a team like the Knicks, that is one concern that I'm looking forward to tomorrow against the Pacers. Another top offensive team from last season is their 3-point defense. They're going to have to put more pressure on the ball, because if not, it's going to lead to an 0-2 start. And then now you're talking about the concern to start the season. They have a little bit of a tough schedule here to start. You still got the Cavaliers, you still got Miami. You have teams like Milwaukee coming up. You have the Pacers again. By the time you play the Sixers on November 12th, will Embiid and Paul George play by then? It looks like they may be able to play by then. So you have a challenging first quarter of the schedule, and the 3-point defense is going to be very critical on how Tibbs manages his drop coverage scheme versus, maybe hedging and just putting more pressure on the basketball. So am I concerned about the schedule, about their start? Listen, it's so tricky because they got smoked so bad. Like, I'm trying to be in the middle of this where it's just one game. That's why tomorrow, and I hate the fact that they play Tuesday. You have to wait 3 days until Friday because it's like, man, can we just play the next day or today? 2 days later, you have to wait 3 days for the home opener. So I think tomorrow we're gonna get a good look at how they respond. It's gonna take time. Mikal Bridges said that today. That he preached patience. And I mentioned, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see if this Knicks fan base is going to have the patience, because I think we're all adapting to these expectations, Dexter. Like, I think the fan base and the team, it's newfound expectations. And you see the fan base after week one, after game one, everybody's in shambles. Everybody's concerned. Everybody's panicking a little bit. Let's wait a few more games and see how they respond.
Fair. That's fair. Go ahead, Brian.
JD, let me ask you about the defense specifically, because one of the things I do wonder about this team is, okay, you don't have in Karl-Anthony Towns a true rim protector, quote unquote. And then with Jalen Brunson at point guard, he's not, Chris Dunn or Gary Payton, so to speak, right? So I'm wondering, like, on the wings, because this is where Boston beat them, they were able to swing and get to their threes, get to those corner threes, and even at the top of the key, they were exploiting mismatches. What does it look like when they actually get their defense right, or can they get their defense right? Because now the Pacers are going to push them and it's going to take some time. But on the wings, this is why you have Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. Are they going to be overtaxed with having to cover for some of the other deficiencies that they may not have had last year when they had a top 2-3 defense in the league?
And that's why, to your concern about the defense long term, I think that's why the Mikal Bridges move, or so this is the perspective, this is the thought, that the Mikal Bridges move was a key, kind of compliment to Karl-Anthony Towns. So I don't think you just get Karl-Anthony Towns and then don't upgrade anywhere else on defense. That's why I was disappointed in, OG and Mikal, especially Mikal in that first game, because if they're not on top of their game individually, and I understand defense, a lot of it also is effort and all that, and it's scheme as well. But I think it also comes down to a point where if you're a good one-on-one defender, you have to lock down your position or contain it as best as possible, because as you mentioned, they already are going to be challenged at the one spot with Jalen Brunson at the center spot. A lot of teams that have the personnel, which is another key dynamic to all of this, is yes, they are weak points in the defense, especially if Tibbs plays drop coverage with Brunson and Towns. But the other team also is going to have the personnel to execute it. And that's why the Celtics are going to be so difficult to beat, is because they have everyone out there on the floor can shoot. And if you compare it to the Knicks, Josh Hart is the weak point offensively in terms of from a shooting perspective. On the Celtics, Derek White can run the pick and roll. Drew Holiday can run the pick and roll. They can go with Jaylen Brown. They can go with Tatum. And if you leave anyone open, they all can shoot the three. So I think it got exposed to the maximum degree because of the personnel they played in game one. Going forward, this is why the Karl-Anthony Towns 5-4, I think, is going to be an interesting conversation. And this is also why I think Precious Achiuwa and Mitchell Robinson are going to be two important players to the future of this team this season, because with Precious, you can bring him in and he gives you another switchable player. Right now, when you look at the starting five, you can only say, Josh Hart, unless you put him on a speed guard. He can switch. Obviously, Mikal can switch. OG can switch.
Yeah.
Once Brunson switches, it's a mismatch.
Yeah.
Once Karl-Anthony Towns switch, it's another mismatch, especially against a guard. So that's why you need Mitch. That's why you need Precious here. So I think it's going to be an issue to start the season, but that's why you need to get guys back so that Tibbs has the necessary pieces to have a full defensive scheme and have his team that will allow him to execute his game plan. But this is the team. And I think the only question you have here for this starting five, guys, is two questions. Is Josh Hart going to be the starter for the full season? Is that going to be something to look at? And then is Karl-Anthony Towns going to be our full-time 5, or are we going to elevate him to the 4 at some point later on in the season? Those are I don't see anything else happening other than those two potential bullet points there for this season.
No, I think they are good questions. I think they're going to matter. And I think a lot of whether Josh Hart, I was talking about this before you came on, JD, a lot of whether Josh Hart does go to the bench is going to have to do with his willingness to shoot. He's got to let it fly. He's got to be willing to shoot. He's got to make teams pay. But, it's easy to say he's got to make him pay and hit the shots, but he has to take the shots too. He's got to be willing to do that. When you watch this game, and I know we got a little bit more time before Stefan Bondy comes on, but I know that you were disappointed, obviously, with how the Knicks came out, right? You expect a little bit more effort. Do you feel like this game showed that the gap is pretty wide between the Celtics and the Knicks? Or is this a case of like, all right, man, they got some things to work on. By the next time they see them in February, things could look a lot different?
No, I don't think it showed that, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to overreact to a point. I can overreact to certain, aspects on the court that we saw that we can see as a red flag. I'm not going to overreact in terms of the big picture of these two teams, where they're going to be at the end of the season. And because again, it's one of those things where literally everything that could go wrong went wrong. And we're talking about breaking records by the third quarter. I think they actually broke a record in the first half with 17 made threes. I think that's a franchise record for the Celtics in a half. They didn't break the full game record. And so I don't think it showed that there's a huge gap, because at the end of the day, I still think there's some things to the Celtics that you can get into once we show the pressure. Remember, this is the team we wanted to face. And everybody talked about because of OG, because of the physicality, because of this, because of that. We never got to see it. And just because game one just didn't go your way doesn't mean that all of a sudden, there's a huge gap and we need to get 2 more stars, or we need to, reconstruct this line. Like, no, it's chill, relax. It was one game, and yes, they launched 63s, but that's not sustainable in terms of that usage and that amount and that efficiency percentage. Those things are not sustainable. Ebbs and flows, law of averages, things will come down to normal. And then on our end, like, Karl-Anthony Towns has 12 points. You're going to tell me that's what he's going to average this season? Like Mikal playing like that in the first half. You saw how he did in the second half. I know a lot of that was garbage time, but so there's a lot of stuff here that happened that is just not going to be sustainable. So we need to wait and see, give it more time, and see what this Knicks team is going to look at. The Heat, who started 8-9 during that year, where they were trying to, mesh in Dwayne Wade and LeBron and Chris Bosh and all the complimentary pieces they got in that free agency season, and they started 8-9, and the everything was the worst thing in the world, and you saw how that panned out. The Knicks are going to, float around 500 here for about 10, 11 games, and then they'll take off. So we need to see what is going to be the end game here and what's the maximum that Tom Thibodeau can get out of this team. I'll tell you one thing. There's one player that is ready to go. He's still in playoff mode, and that's Deuce McBride, and that's a positive for the New York Knicks.
Yo, Deuce McBride was out there, was cooking. He was out there cooking. I mean, he was kind of like the only one. I mean, Brunson played decently too, but he was the only one. I agree. Listen, we've been talking about this. Brian and I have said this. I don't think that you can trip over this too much. I know it's an embarrassing loss. I know it's not what the Knicks fans want to see. But last thing before I let you go, JD, too, you talked about the expectations of Brian. I want to hear your thoughts on this too, because are Knicks fans really ready to deal with these expectations? Except here's the thing for me, and I'm going to put this out there to the Knicks fans. I get it. You've been in the wilderness for a long time. You've been suffering. You haven't seen much win. I get all that. I do. I really do. You know, Brian, I understand. JD, I understand. All I'm saying is you've seen the progress and the build of this team. And this is the first time your expectations. So I feel like that's why you got to chill a little bit. You got to just chill. You got to just, this is the first, you can't act like you've been here before because you haven't been here since the 90s. That's just the truth. You haven't been here since the 90s. So don't give me this. We deserve what? You deserve to see the team build. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to get off my soapbox. How do you guys feel? Are the Knicks fans doing too much who are tripping over one game? And will they ever be calm? If they win tomorrow night, is that going to calm everybody down? Or if they go 5-5, is everybody going to start tripping? That's what I want to know.
Listen, it's so funny because I saw a lot of fans talk about this is championship or bust season. There's so many groups of fans within the fan base. You have the group that says, hey, the regular season doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Talk to me in May, talk to me in June, et cetera, et cetera. But then after game one, everybody's like, oh my God. It's like, wait, I thought the regular season didn't matter. So just chill. And that's why I mentioned, I think this is a period of all of us to adapt. You know, media members, fans, the front office, the players. Like, this is newfound territory for us where there's legit expectations. Like, you were going into the past few seasons hoping, you know, maybe this year we'll get past the first round. And then maybe this year, you know, we'll get to the second round and maybe challenge for the Eastern Conference Finals. Listen, this year, people are saying if we don't even get to the Eastern Conference Finals, you're going to have to make some changes somewhere in this franchise. Like, that's where we're at in terms of expectations. And others think the ECF is not even good enough. Like, you better get to the NBA Finals because when you look at the closet and you open the closet, it's not that many draft picks left. There's not that many assets left to, you know, improve this team. So this is it. And so I just think people need to just relax. Let it play out. It's game one. And they'll make it work. This you know, the Knicks will work this out, but I think it's so crazy with this fan base because game one and they are already in panic mode or just upset. And I just think that, you know, just let it play out, man. And if they win on Friday, you know what's gonna happen is we're back, number 2 seed. We're gonna be the second best team in the East. We're ready for the Celtics again. Let's give it a few more weeks. So it's the ebbs and flows, and I think it's just the adrenaline of, you know, this is going to be the team, and you want from day one for it to click. You want to be able to say as a fan from day one, from game 1, game 2, game 3, yes, we are a championship team. And sometimes you don't see that caliber and that level of play within the first few games, especially when you just shifted this starting 5. You could even say Josh Hart. I know Josh Hart played there in the end, but him, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Mikal Bridges, these are 3 new players in terms of, you know, working together from the start of the season as starters that you have to allow that chemistry to build. So there's going to be some struggles, but if you're expecting the Knicks to be championship caliber, I don't think you're going to see that level of play within the first couple weeks of the season.
I don't disagree with you at all. I think people gotta stay away from the ledge. JD, I gotta let you run because we got Steph here. I appreciate the time. I'm gonna check in on you tomorrow and make sure you will not have the same demeanor that you did the last time I saw you Tuesday night.
Thank you guys, and yeah, hopefully tomorrow night the Knicks win, and hopefully the New York Yankees, you know, steal a game in LA.
Well, I'm not. You're gonna be like CP trying to get me to say go Yankees. That is not going.
And I'm not a Mets hater, by the way.
I know we talked about this.
I'm one of those Yankee fans that I root for the Mets. I don't even. There's no hatred. There's
no hate. But you're not.
A Met fan could tell me in my face, I hate you guys, and doesn't do anything to me. So.
Yeah, that's why you're a good
shout
man.
out to you guys. Shout out to Stefan Bondy, and let's go Knicks.
Anytime. Thanks, JD. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks, JD.
All right, that is JD. Check him out on Knicks Fan TV. One of the best out here doing it in terms of the content creation. Right now, we're going to bring in my guy, my coworker, Stefan Bondy, Knicks beat reporter for the New York Post. Steph, what's going on, man?
What's up, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Virtually.
I will see you in person tomorrow at the Garden. So I will see you there tomorrow at the Garden.
Awesome,
I haven't seen you
man.
in a couple weeks in person, so I will see you. Steph, what's the vibe of this team coming off this embarrassing loss to the Celtics? Some Knicks fans are tripping. You heard us just talking about it. What's the vibe of the team when you were around them the last couple of days in practice and talking to them? What's their vibe right now?
So I wasn't at practice today, full disclosure. I was at the game in Boston, however, and I think they took it better than I thought in terms of just the way in the big picture. they looked at it like, hey, they made a bunch of. I think Josh Hart said something like drug test those guys, like joke, because he had never seen guys hit 3-pointers at that level and that frequency. And I think Tibbs's quote was something along the lines of, "I'm disappointed in the performance, but I'm not disappointed in the guys." Now that was their public face. I'm sure behind the scenes there was some more aggravation than they let on, especially from Tibbs, because the effort really wasn't there like you would expect on defense, and part of that is the miscommunication stuff, and maybe it looks worse than the effort actually was, just because they didn't know what looked like they knew what they were doing on rotations, and the Celtics have been together for so long that they can play blindfold and know where each other is on the court. And Knicks obviously aren't on that level yet. But I think they looked at the big picture, and, you cannot have a tougher opener than at Boston.
You definitely can't. That's a tough one. Go ahead, Brian.
What specifically about the defense would you say, like, they're looking to get a handle on quickly? Because now they're going to play the Pacers. The Pacers, I wouldn't say completely similar offensively, but they're going to play at a fast pace. They're going to try to shoot a lot of threes. They're going to try and spread the Knicks out, as they did successfully at times during the semifinals last year. So what, in terms of the defense, you think they're looking to solve immediately?
I mean, they got to get a handle on the screens from the center, the screens that are being set by whoever Karl Anthony Towns is guarding and whoever Jericho Sims is guarding, because that was just a devastating pick combo with Tatum and Horford, or Tatum and Cornette, or whoever the centers were guarding, just because they looked like they had no clue on how to stop the 3-pointer. And if they blitzed the screen, then Jason Tatum would swing the ball, and they'd find an open man somewhere. And they hit a lot of open 3-pointers. The Knicks can say that the Celtics were shooting lights out, which is true, but a lot of those looks were wide open. A lot of them were coming off screens with the big. Now, listen, nobody would accuse Karl Anthony Towns of being a great defender. I think everybody understood what they were getting there. He's not a good defender, and they're going to have to learn how to compensate for that lack of defense. And a lot of that was thinking, well, we got OG Anunoby, we got Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges could not hang with Jason Tatum in game one. He could not get through those screens. It was a big problem. So, if I were to play that game over again, I'd put OG Anunoby on Jason Tatum, just because Jaylen Brown wasn't feeling it like Jason Tatum was. We'll see what they do with Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton is a different kind of player than Jason Tatum. I suspect they're going to put Mikal Bridges on him, but we'll see. They gotta figure out a way to scheme better on those screens.
Yeah, that's something they definitely have to do. I think when I look at this, and we were just talking about this stuff, you're going to have Knicks fans, and you and I have been covering basketball and covering sports for a long time. You can't trip over one game. But how long do you think it realistically, when you look at this Knicks team, do you think it will take them to gel? How long do you think it's going to take before they get their act together and look like a complete team with these new pieces that they have, particularly in the starting lineup?
I think offensively, they're going to look fantastic right away. Defensively, it's going to be a learning process for everybody, the coaching staff, for the new players, because I don't think they quite know what to do yet. That's what at least that's what it looked like against the Celtics. Now, granted, 2 years ago, the Knicks beat the Celtics in the home opener. Remember that game? They were going crazy outside the Garden. That season ended up, was that 3 seasons ago? 3 seasons ago.
3 seasons ago. But that's a Bing Bong game you're talking about.
That was the Bing Bong game.
Yep.
That season was a disaster.
Yep.
So that can just show you that, like, the opener doesn't matter that much. And even no matter which way it goes, like, all right, it's the opener. So that's the glass half full look at it. And I think they are going to take 20 games before they fully realize, this is how we're going to have to play defensively, because it didn't look like they knew in game one.
Yeah, it did. It didn't look like that. It's going to take them some time.
Yeah. One question I did have, just sticking with that, is, do you feel like, Steph, that there's a lower ceiling on the defense this season compared to last year? Because last year they were able to get to top 2, top 3, based on like many of the metrics defensively. But this year, at least for now, obviously the team could look very different by the end because they still have another move or two they can make. But with Karl Anthony Towns, you have a below average center defensively. a below average 5, not a true anchor. And then with Jalen Brunson, you have somebody at the point guard who's not like a stopper defensively either. The 1 and the 5 positions, the most important positions on defense. You have 2 wings, obviously Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, who could help cover a lot of that up. But do you feel like the defensive ceiling is a little bit lower because of the starting point and the end point of this defense and what it looks like so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the lower ceiling defense, higher ceiling offense. I think that was my expectation coming into the season. Look back at when Tom Thibodeau coached Karl-Anthony Towns in Minnesota. They had Andrew Wiggins and Jimmy Butler on the wings. That defense was not good. That defense was in the mid-20s in terms of defensive rating. And then you look at Minnesota when Chris Finch is there, they got Rudy Gobert, who is an all defense defensive player of the year kind of guy to help compensate for some of the stuff they were missing with Karl-Anthony Towns. Now Mitchell Robinson could come back and he could start at center and it can change the whole dynamic of this team. But I think right now what you're looking at is a spread 5 offense that can be absolutely dynamic and a defense with a lot of holes.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting. One more thing, Steph, before I let you go. I think fans want to see this, but do you expect to see better energy from this Knicks team when we see them tomorrow night at the Garden in the home opener with everything, considering the fact that they got knocked out by the Pacers, bounced by them last year in 7 games? I know it's a different look for this team, but are you expecting different energy in this home opener at the Garden?
Yeah, I mean, I think in that game 1, Boston it was from the beginning. I think the Knicks just got deflated very early. And I know it is concerning because if you look back at last season's team, you can think, well, they're never out of it. They're going to launch a comeback at some point. They did not come back at some point in game 1. It was just a blowout from, mid first quarter on. So I think a lot of the air was taken out of them very early. And that's not to excuse the lack of effort. I think they still tried to give, pretty good effort. I think just the miscommunication made it look bad. So I expect them to come out and look a lot more enthused, if that, or inspired, or whatever word you want to use.
All right, more inspired. That is my guy, Stefan Bondy. By the way, Steph, I gotta let you know, I was watching you on Twitter on Sunday. You were out here trolling the Giants fans. I noticed that you were out here, and I appreciated it because I appreciate a good troll job. And you had some other Knicks media members. They were kind of angry at you, and I was like, "Why are they so angry at Steph? Why?"
Well, I'll tell you, if you're talking about Steve Popper, I'll tell you why.
I am talking about Steve Popper.
This guy, and I've been arguing with him for years already. This guy tried to tell me from the beginning that Daniel Jones' contract was good, and I said that's a terrible contract. When he signed it, I was like, "That's a terrible contract." And as the years have gone on, as the season's gone on, it is a bad contract. Like, that's not even debatable at this point, but he still won't admit it. He has a problem admitting he's wrong, so I just keep jabbing at him.
So when I see Steve tomorrow, if I go up to him and I say, "Steve, that Daniel Jones contract is a bad contract," he's still going to tell me no.
No, he's gonna give you this. He's gonna say, "Oh, it's the offensive line. He doesn't have the receivers are dropping the ball. It's the same yada yada nonsense I got to hear for 2 years straight. When in fact it is the quarterback that's the problem."
Oh man, see, I'm just letting people know Steph is here for the Knicks insight, but I did love the NFL trolling. It was great. It was great. I loved it. Steph, I will see you tomorrow at the game. Appreciate the time. Thank you, my friend.
All right, bud.
All right, that is Stefan Bondy, Knicks beat writer for the New York Post, doing a great job talking about the Knickerbockers and also trolling Giants fans. Which
just keep throwing it to Malik Neighbors. So you
there you go. That gave me a lot. That gave me a lot of joy. So I was like, Steph was out here with the Twitter fingers the other day. Wasn't bad at all. Dexter Henry Bryan Fonseca here on Knicks Weekly Live for New York Got Game. 2 great guests joining us today. We had JD. We had Stefan Bondy. Good stuff. Now we're going to open it up. We're going to just have some final thoughts. We're going to open it up to you, the fans, in the comments. Thank you for everybody who has been checking in. I feel like I'm going to mess the name up again. Is Jay Quazza? Did I have that right?
Yes. It's Jay Quazza.
There you go. God, call me an official Pokemon fan now. Yeah. You guys.
Rayquaza is the actual Pokemon, the legendary Pokemon that you had to get in Emerald, and we're not going to get into the whole thing here.
Hey, we're down to talk everything. Brian will fit in some obscure video game reference, some hip hop reference, which I can definitely always appreciate. I'm just letting the people know what they're.
I got a wrestling shirt on right now.
There you go. That too. The wrestling
Bunny shirt on right now.
There you go. That I'm just letting people know. Beside the Knicks stuff, you will get some of that. So just let you know. Shout out to you, Jay Quazza, because you have been checking in, and you said that last year you were able to get seats for the home opener for about $120. Now those same seats are over $400. I may never be able to afford to go to a game. This makes me sad. It does. However, here's a hip-hop reference. In the words of the legendary rapper Fat Joe, representing the BX, yesterday's price is not today's price. And the demand has gone up, right? The expectations have gone up. The price has gone up. I'm not saying that should happen to you, Jay Quazza. I hear you. I want the games to be accessible for everybody. I want people to come to the games. Yeah. But I also understand a little bit of the supply and demand. It's tough. It's tough.
If people are willing to pay it, then people are going to pay it.
And I know we're all thinking like, who has that much money all the time? But
you'd be surprised. Listen, me personally, I'm not doing it for that much, but also like I could, if I want to, I could probably get a credential, so I wouldn't do it anyway. But 400 is just a lot for me. Like I'm not. I looked at Mets tickets, by the way, for the playoffs. I looked at Mets tickets for the playoffs because I'll buy a Mets ticket, but it was like 500 something for 2 seats, and I'm like, all right.
400 is a lot for 400 to me is a lot for a regular season game. There is I will let people know. A couple years ago, I paid. It was actually gifted to me from a friend, so I shouldn't say that. One of my homies got me, but I know it was a little bit under 400 a couple years ago for a playoff ticket. Which for a playoff ticket, I'm not going to be as mad about that. I was at Game 2 against the Heat. It was. I just went as out sitting as a fan in the stands. I get that. 400. I get that it's opening night, but it's a bit much. Jay Quazza, if let us know, where were those seats that you saw for 400? That's what I'm intrigued at. Because if it's in the nosebleeds, I'm gonna just keep it real. I don't do that. My daughter doesn't even want me to do that at a Liberty game. She's like, nope, I can't sit up there. And I'm like, do you know what it costs to sit down there?
It's high though. Yeah. In her defense. It is
high. She was not feeling it. That's another
Barclays Center, like up, like
it's the angle.
If they have like there's been occasions when covering games there, because I used to cover the Nets for people who don't know, like as a basically beat reporter, and usually we'd be in the 100s, which is fine. There were occasions where it was like the entire national media wanted to be there for they were playing the Lakers and LeBron was there, or whatever, that they had to stuff some of us. Smaller outlet people. I wasn't at the Post at the time. In the 200 something section, and I would just be like, no, I refuse. I'll watch this from like the media sort of lounge area, whatever downstairs. 200.
You're like, I'm not going up there. I don't blame you. It's different at Knicks games because they have the Chase Bridge, and while so when I'm at the game tomorrow, like Steph sits in the lower bowl section. And maybe they'll put me in the lower bowl. I doubt it because it's the home opener, but I'm going to be up on the Chase Bridge. But the good thing with the Knicks is when you're up on the Chase Bridge is press for people watching who might want to know and who've sat around the Chase Bridge. It's really a pretty good view. That's one thing about the Knicks. You're up there and high, and it's a pretty good view. Now,
Chase Bridge is sneaky good for fights.
I've heard that.
It's not bad.
Right.
Okay. I've seen Gennady Golovkin up there. I saw Conor McGregor, UFC 205, like, sneaky good for fights, although I obviously much prefer being on the as close as possible.
Totally understood. I have to say, okay, so Jay Quazza says that he believes that it was in, and I'm sorry, I didn't know if your gender, if you were a guy or girl. I did not know this. I apologize if I have that wrong. But you said that you think it was in the 400 section. 400s to be in the 400s? Ooh, that's tough. Now, my producer Jeff. He said the cheapest ticket that he's seeing tomorrow right now on Ticketmaster is at $289. So the price has gone down a little bit.
It's like Mets playoff tickets. That's the cheapest I was seeing for like 500s.
Prices come down a little bit. So
I ain't trying to sit up there.
We'll see.
Mets game. It gets cold.
No. let us know in the comments if you are going to the Knicks home opener on Friday night against the Indiana Pacers. Should be a good one. I will be in the building. Should be doing a post-game report from there. Also some good stuff coming up on New York Got Game this week. Have a really special guest to talk about the Knicks that I'm excited about. We'll tell you guys a little bit more about that on Saturday. We were talking about when we talked to Bondy, when we talked to JD, we brought up some possible changes with this roster. And, Jay Quazza, who's been checking in and doing a wonderful job. We appreciate the support. Hit that like button, everybody. He said that, look, I need Hart to come off the bench and Towns at the 4. Is that the lineup, Brian, that you eventually want to see? Like, do you want Hart on the bench? Do you want Towns at the 4? And if he's at the 4, who do you want at the 5? Do you want Mitchell Robinson? Like, if that moves,
it would have to be. It would have to be.
But do you think that's the best lineup for the Knicks? And look, let's keep it 100 when we're talking about this. Is it the best lineup for the Knicks against the Celtics? Because that's what everybody's gunning for. So is it the best lineup for the Knicks against them?
We haven't mentioned Kristaps Porzingis. We probably should have, because he didn't play. And when he plays, then it's even tougher because he's 7'12" or whatever he is and could stretch the floor from like the logo, basically. You know what I mean? Like, and that's intentional that they do it, that they run their offense that way. So I think the best case scenario, if the Knicks are going to be fully optimized from an offensive perspective, is yes, Karl-Anthony Towns to the 4. Mitchell Robinson profiles as the type of guy you would want at the 5. The question is health. It's always going to be health. And also there's some deficiencies on the offensive side. Like he every year wants to do something with the ball and pretty much hints at he could do more with the ball. And they never give him those responsibilities, probably because they just disagree philosophically that he can do things with the ball. Like there's some sort of disconnect there. But the point is that he may be limited, but it's a role that can work because he'd be next to Karl-Anthony Towns. It's just a matter of, can you trust Mitchell Robinson to be healthy enough to pull that off for the amount of time that you're going to need him to pull that off for? Or do you go out and get somebody who can? But I think someone who is that type of center, that would work, because I do think Josh Hart's future, while he could close some games, like he still may be in your closing lineup with, everyone you just saw play against the Celtics. Like this could still be your best closing lineup to end the season. But ultimately, I think that Karl-Anthony Towns to the 4 and Josh Hart coming off the bench is an adjustment we're going to have to see at some point this season. It's probably something we're going to see when Mitchell Robinson gets acclimated. And we'll talk about the trade deadline when it comes, because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. But we'll see if they use that contract also to try to get a different center who can play that role, who maybe can do a little more offensively, who's maybe a little more reliable from a health standpoint.
Yeah, wondering if that's the move for the Knicks to make. That's one that's going to be interesting to see. I think part of what we talked about in terms of with the Pacers, I'm really intrigued to see how this team responds tomorrow. I think that's the thing for me. I'm really keeping my eye on the first 5 to 6 minutes of this game. The crowd is going to be pumped up. It's not going to be playoff-like, but they're going to be pumped up. They're going to want to cheer this team on. They're going to get behind Karl-Anthony Towns, who had an underwhelming game with 12 points. You want to see how he bounces back against this team. I really think that he's got to establish himself in front of this home crowd. And one thing's like, look, and I could have brought this up with Steph is on. Steph and I had a conversation about it, and Steph wrote a great article about this at the start of the preseason. The label that Karl-Anthony Towns is soft, and he was sort of dispelling that notion in his article. But I think there are Knicks fans who still believe that. There are Knicks fans who are still worried about that and think that he is soft, right? And I do think it's important that he gets the Garden crowd on his side. I will say that. I don't think Cat is soft. I've never thought that. What I think is, and what I personally had a little trepidation on with this trade, and I talked to you about this, Brian, was he has had a penchant for making dumb mistakes and dumb fouls, particularly in the playoffs, that pulls him off the floor. That was my concern. When his team needs him the most, will he be there on the floor to make the right plays or a chance to make the right plays? But we've seen it time and time again where he's had stupid fouls and he's not on the floor. And that's the thing that annoys me. And that's part of his quote unquote disappearing act, right? Like that's part of the problem. So I think for him, I'm really intrigued in this whole season to see how motivated he is by this move to New York, being around his Dominican peoples. You know, the Heights, Washington Heights is going to be in the building on Friday night. I would expect nothing less.
Yes, sir.
And which is beautiful. That's beautiful. I want to see it. I just hope they keep the same energy that they have when we watch these beautiful Puerto Rico versus DR baseball games. I'd love some of that in the Garden. That would be great. Don't you want that in the Garden? I want that in the Garden.
I mean, listen, that's a quote unquote rivalry, but like they were dancing all game amongst each other when that baseball game was happening in Miami for the WBC, which we obviously talked about a bunch on here.
Yes, we have. It was beautiful. I'm just saying we could bring some of that to the Garden, and I'd like it.
First play of the game, I'm trying to get Karl Anthony Towns just easy bucket.
You're going to him.
Doesn't have to be a three. Just either a post up, like really seal hard and get within 10 feet of the rim, or just try to get a pick and roll going where you can just get him an easy bucket. Just let him hear that Garden crowd explode immediately, especially because with the way Indiana's going to play, it's going to be speed, and Miles Turner is going to be looking to stretch Karl Anthony Towns, get him away from the rim, and try to really hit that 3-point shot, especially from the top of the key, so that Indiana does have the space that they want to operate. So,
yeah. It's gonna be very interesting to see. Listen, it's a good matchup. The Knicks have tons of reasons to be motivated. It's a team that bounced them last year. They did not play good in game one. Some of the fan base, not all of you, some of the fan base is panicking, but things, can be good. Things can change in a New York minute, and things could change with one game. And we'll see. I don't think this one game on Friday is going to tell the whole story of the Knicks. I happen to agree with Steph in that I think this is going to take 20 to 25 games, right? Like this is generally what this takes or it's generally what I would say is my timeline for judging a team,
right?
In NBA
Christmas.
season.
Yeah. For me, it's like, where are you when we get to Christmas?
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And listen, sometimes it's a good time for the Knicks to evaluate. Remember last year, the Knicks made a trade right after Christmas, and they got OG Anunoby. So I think it's a good time to evaluate. It's enough of a sample size for you to see, at least get some idea of what your team could be. We can't go off crazy off the small sample size theater. We definitely, one is the smallest sample size you can go off of. That's why y'all can't go crazy off of it. It is literally the smallest sample. We shouldn't even call it a sample size, right? Like you can't even call it a sample size.
Yeah.
Jay Quaz is checking in here. Says, I believe Cat will have his Nick moment this year. I guarantee it.
It better be a good one.
yeah. That's the thing, Jay Quaz. What kind of moment? Like, is this a positive moment? I'm assuming you meant positive moment.
I assume so too, but
I assume so too. But these things can sometimes go the wrong way.
This is New York. You know what I mean? Like the moments aren't always. People were trying to run, and this happens every season. People try to run Francisco Lindor out of town every year. Now I don't think they're ever going to do it again. You know what I mean? Unless he's like bad at the end of his contract. But like you have to just win people over. Like the moments could also be really bad. Like we remember some dubious ones from some very infamous players, even that Knicks fans know all too well over the last 20 years. Like, it wasn't always great when Stefan Marbury was on the team. You know what I mean? Like, there wasn't always all amazing moments. So hopefully Karl Anthony Towns is a good one, because that's a question a lot of people have too. Like, how is he going to deal with the crowd? And that's not really a question that we're going to have answered right away. Like, well,
right.
This is going to be a season long and really a contract long thing with Karl Anthony Towns. This is just literally the very beginning of it.
And I think for him, the moment, I'm going to be honest. I hear you, Jay Quazza. Nobody's going to care about a regular season moment for Karl Anthony Towns. It's going to come down to the playoffs, right? Like, he's got to have He said
this year. So it could be the playoffs.
Okay, It could be the playoffs. Fair enough. It's got to come down to the playoffs, and he's got it. That's when it made. I think Brunson has solidified himself in the hearts of many Knicks fans already because of what you've seen him do in the playoffs, how you've seen him step up in big moments. And if Karl Anthony Towns helps in that way, then things will be fine. Things will be fine. I'm going to leave that as the last word, because things will be fine. All is not lost after one blowout loss, 132-109, with the Knicks falling to the Celtics on Tuesday. But they have a chance. It's a long season. You always have another chance. They'll get right back on the ship, and they will see if they can right that ship on Friday night in the home opener against the Pacers. That is my guy, Bryan Fonseca. Check out his fantastic work with the New York Post. Also, the Action Network does some great jobs on there. If you like talking about bets, you want to bet on some of this Knicks stuff, follow my man, Bryan. He's got you covered on that all the time. We will be back next week, next Thursday. We'll have more details on that, probably a little bit later because it's going to be Halloween. I understand some people like myself have to take the kiddies out treating, so you have to go and do that. Some of you still go out trick-or-treating. I feel like you're probably too grown for that. I don't know. Bryan, are you dressing up as anything for Halloween? Will you be on next week in a costume?
Probably not. It's not. You'd be surprised, but it's not a thing that I do or celebrate necessarily. I love candy though. I'll take the candy, but I don't really dress up for Halloween like that. No. Look, if I'm invited to a party and if I deem it worthy to go, like worth going to, then yeah, I'll dress up and go to the party, but that hasn't happened in quite some time.
Fair enough. I have a Halloween party I got invited to in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure if I'm dressing up. Well, I'll let everybody know how that goes. Just to let everybody know, I will not be wearing a costume on next week's show. In case you were wondering, that is not going to be happening. We will salute to you, Jay Quazza. We appreciate you checking in, and your comments and your questions. Please tap in with us next week. We will have more details early in the week about who our guest will be, who we'll be talking to. We'll be doing this every week, myself and Bryan talking about the Knicks. And I'm really intrigued, Bryan, because next week we don't know where the Knicks fan is going to be. We don't know where their mood is going to be, how they're going to be feeling, but they will have a little bit more of a sample size under their belt that we will be able to talk about.
Games.
Yep. Also to let the people know, just as a programming note, because the fact the Knicks play Monday, I'm probably going to drop the episode of New York Got Game a little earlier this week and drop it on Sunday. So you're going to get it a little bit day earlier so people can just have some more time to digest that as we talk about the Knicks start through their first 2 games. So look out for that episode coming on Sunday. Once again, that is Bryan Fonseca. I'm Dexter Henry. We will catch you next time on New York Got Game, Knicks Weekly Live. Until then.